Before stories had vampires, before the shadow of Dracula stretched across centuries of fiction, there was a ruler whose cruelty was not fable, but state policy. A man whose life was forged in the crucible of empires, and whose name would become a synonym for terror. It begins here, in the shadow of foreign walls. A boy, barely a teenager, stands as a political prisoner. His name was Vlad, a prince of Wallachia, a small but strategic Christian principality. But here, in the heart of the Ottoman Empire, he was a hostage. He wore fine clothes, a reminder of his royal blood, but cold chains bound his world. He and his younger brother, Radu, were pawns in the great game of empires, a brutal chess match played across the Balkans. In the year 1442, they were sent to the court of Sultan Murad II as a guarantee of their father's wavering loyalty, a living deposit to ensure Wallachia remained a vassal state. For a child, this was not abstract politics. It was a cold, daily lesson in power. He watched as favor was given and just as quickly taken away. He learned that promises were fragile things, easily broken by a stronger man's will. Trust was a currency for fools. This captivity became the forge of his soul, his first great turning point. It was an education in both the heights of culture and the depths of human cruelty. He saw the Sultan's swift, brutal justice, how the visceral display of fear could command an obedience that loyalty never could. Being a political prisoner was not idle confinement. It was a masterclass in absolute rule. He studied their military tactics, their administrative efficiency, their unforgiving response to the slightest defiance. These lessons sank deep, hardening the young prince like tempered steel. His brother, Radu, adapted. He was handsome, charming, and found favor in the gilded court, even becoming a close companion of the future Sultan, Mehmed II. But Vlad resisted. A quiet, cold fire of defiance burned within him. Every bow, every forced smile was an act of rebellion in waiting. The feeling of abandonment festered into a singular resolve, to one day hold the chains, not wear them. He nursed a dual hatred for the empire that held him captive and for the weakness of his own people that allowed it to happen. Captivity was a long, slow burn of trauma and observation. He learned that to be weak was to be a victim. To trust was to invite betrayal. The world, he concluded, was ruled by raw, unblinking power. The lessons were brutal, simple, and terrifyingly effective. Then, in 1447, news arrived like a death knell. His father and elder brother, Mircea, had been murdered, betrayed and brutally killed by rival Wallachian nobles, the Boyars, with the backing of Hungary. The lesson was complete. In that moment, he was no longer just a hostage. He was an heir to a broken throne, armed with a terrible practical knowledge of power, and he was ready to return. Vlad's return to Wallachia was not a simple homecoming. It was a violent, desperate struggle for a crown he believed was his by right of blood. His first brief reign in 1448, backed by the Ottomans, ended almost as soon as it began, lasting only 2 months before he was driven out by his Hungarian-backed rival. It was another harsh reminder that power was not given. It had to be seized and held with an iron grip. Forced back into exile, he spent the next 8 years moving between the courts of Moldavia and Hungary, a prince without a country. But this was not a time of idleness. Waiting only sharpened his ambition and refined his methods. He gathered allies, studied the shifting political landscape, and memorized the face of every betrayal. He knew the Boyars, the landed aristocracy of Wallachia, were a nest of vipers. They had killed his father and brother. They would betray him just as quickly for a better offer. His second ascent to the throne in 1456 marked the second great turning point of his life. This time, he would not be so easily unseated. He arrived not as a hopeful prince seeking acceptance, but as an instrument of judgment. His first priority was not to win hearts, but to break wills. To build a new, strong Wallachia, the old, rotten structure had to be utterly demolished. He saw corruption everywhere. The Boyars had grown rich and powerful, carving up the country for their own benefit, while the state weakened and its borders frayed. Vlad decided to make an example so profound, so horrifying, that no one would ever forget it. Fear would not just be a tool of punishment, it would be the very foundation of his new order. On Easter Sunday of 1457, he invited hundreds of boyars and their families to a great feast in his capital, Târgoviște. As they ate and drank, he asked them a simple question. How many princes had they served in their lifetimes? Many boasted of having outlived 5, 6, even 7 rulers, proof to Vlad of their endemic treason and instability. His soldiers then seized them all. The elders, the tales say, were impaled on the spot, a gruesome forest of aristocracy sprouting on the hills outside the city. The younger, healthier boyars and their families were marched 50 miles to the ruins of Poenari Castle and forced to rebuild it with their bare hands. Few survived the ordeal. A shockwave of terror crossed Wallachia. It was a brutal, bloody declaration. The old ways were over. There would be no more plotting, no more shifting allegiances, no more king-making. There would only be Vlad's law. The message was simple and absolute. Loyalty was the only path to survival. Betrayal meant a slow, agonizing death. With his internal enemies silenced, Vlad turned his attention to the wider problems of his realm. Wallachia was plagued by crime. The roads were unsafe. Merchants feared to travel. Thieves and beggars thrived in the towns, and the powerful Saxon merchants of neighboring Transylvania often treated his laws and trade regulations with contempt. A strong, independent nation required absolute order. The terror he had applied to politics now extended to the streets. His justice was swift, public, and unforgettable. He did not distinguish between a petty thief who stole a loaf of bread and a murderer in the severity of his response. The crime was defiance of his order, and the punishment was absolute. The stake, once a tool of war, became his domestic symbol of law. He did not hide justice behind prison walls. He made it a public spectacle, a lesson for all to witness. Fields of the impaled were left to rot along the roadsides, grotesque warnings to any who might consider breaking his peace. A famous tale tells of a golden cup he placed at the public well of Targoviste. Any could drink from it, but none dared steal it. It remained untouched throughout his entire reign. Order was held not by a large police force, but by a pervasive, chilling dread of the consequences. And it worked. Chroniclers, even his enemies, admitted that during his rule, Wallachia became one of the safest lands in Europe. Merchants could travel openly with bags of gold. The common people were terrified of their prince, yet they were also protected from the lawlessness and corruption that had previously ruled their lives. To Vlad, it was a simple, brutal equation. The suffering of a few criminals and traitors bought safety and stability for the many. He lived by a maxim he had learned long ago. When a man or a prince is powerful and strong, he can make peace as he wants to, but when he is weak, a stronger one will come and do what he wants to him. He was determined to be the strong one, yet his system was a double-edged sword. A state built on pure fear suppresses not only crime and treason, but all opposition, righteous or not. It silences critics and innovators alike. His rule was absolute. His word, law, his punishments, final. There was no room for appeal, no process for review, no space for mercy. He saw the world in black and white. There were loyal subjects and there were enemies. There was no middle ground. It was brutally effective in the short term, restoring order to a fractured land and forging a sense of national unity through shared fear. But his name would be remembered less for the order he created and more for the unimaginable horror he used to achieve it. Having secured his throne internally, Vlad's gaze turned outward. His reign stood precariously between two great powers, the Kingdom of Hungary to the north and the mighty Ottoman Empire to the south. As a vassal, Wallachia was obligated to pay an annual tribute to the Sultan. Forged in Ottoman captivity and fiercely independent, Vlad despised this constant bleed of his country's sovereignty and wealth. The stage was set for a confrontation he had been preparing for his entire life. Enjoyed this dark history? Like the video, subscribe to Random Ass Facts, and ring the bell for more untold legends.